Context is an extremely important role of storytelling. Context presents information to the audience, and it can connect with the audience and the things that matter to them. It causes them to care. The difference between engaging context and adequate context is its ability to connect with the audience's own values, ideals, and life, thus engaging the audience. In this video, I will be exploring the use of engaging context through the two texts The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood and V for Vendetta, the 2005 feature film. Through these examples, I will be exploring the representation of women in dystopian societies and how they are parallel to women in our own society. Through the context of a story, we can come to understand the views and values of an author, as well as the overall meaning of a text. The context of a text involves a range of influences. These include the social and political context of the time that they were writing or that they grew up in, historical context, the time in which a story is set, and the underlying norms and conventions that are set within that period. Cultural context involving religion, race, and nationality, as well as food, dress, art, and music. Ideological context, the systems of belief and ideas that underpin our attitudes and behavior, as well as technological and environmental context in our world. These different forms of context impact the way an audience receives important messages and concepts left by the writer. In The Handmaid's Tale, a novel by Margaret Atwood, context is used the way Atwood conveys women, the treatment of women, the roles of women, the representation of women, and the oppression of women. Atwood's book is based around a world where a totalitarian government enforces draconian laws and identities stripped away. Our main protagonist is a handmaid, meaning she is one of the few women who are fertile and thus must bear children for the commanders and their barren wives. In The Handmaid's Tale, the oppression of women is one of the main focus areas, as it is written through the perspective of one of the most oppressed groups of the society depicted within the novel. Context is used in The Handmaid's Tale as a fundamental backdrop of the representation of women. The women in this novel are compelling, with characters such as Offred, Ofglen, Moira, Serena Joy, Janine, and Aunt Lydia. All of them represent such different and interesting viewpoints, ideologies, and justifications of their own actions. As well as this, they are all women in a novel centered around the oppression of women. It's an interesting point that each of the women have differing opinions about their situations, whether they are opposing, submissive, or happy. They represent how people become content with their circumstances, or how easy it is to become content, while others represent the rebel, the fraction of people who oppose a negative situation. When Atwood first published her novel in 1985, she had done so with the purpose of addressing women's rights specifically. At a time when many women's rights movements were pushing forward, throughout Atwood's life, many positives and rights had been achieved for and by women. Abortion rights, legal birth control, the advancement of women in the workforce, and women's wages, the legalization of sexual discrimination, more education and employment for women, divorce, the illegalization of rape by husbands, and the illegalization of firing a pregnant employee. The way Atwood approached the issues that so closely aligned with the issues of the time made the novel instantly popular. Thus, even today, the novel has influence. The fact that women are still fighting for issues today, such as equal pay, women in powerful positions, teen pregnancy, domestic abuse, female genital mutilation, with the President of the United States of America being a known sexist and disrespectful woman, women's rights are still a major focus of the worldwide community. These challenges are reflected within The Handmaid's Tale and are fundamental to the novel's success. While women make up the majority of domestic roles, men make up the masculine and powerful positions within Gilead, commander, guardian, angel, eye. As well as this, women cannot advance within their ranks. While men can always move up positions, eventually to commander, women must stay or move down within their respective titles. A wife can become a widow, and anyone can become an unwoman. Through this system, we can understand the way Gilead oppresses the characters within Gilead, through a totalitarian government and the constant fear of ending up dead. The similarities between Puritan society and the Republic of Gilead are notably seen throughout the novel. Atwood studied New England Puritan society in university. and The Handmaid's Tale is heavily influenced by the standards and functions of Puritan society, especially the way they treated women. Within the novel, many similarities can be seen: the way they dressed, the way they were treated, the roles they played within society, and the power they held within their society and government. Generally zero. These similarities are based on fact, as are many of the examples of the treatment of women within Atwood's novel. The religious examples seen within the novel are aplenty. The justification of actions through the Bible or other religious means, more specifically the whole handmaid's purpose, the justification of Rachel and Leah, the general use of Christianity throughout the novel as a way to enforce and reason the actions of the government, the way religion is used as a tool of oppression, not just as against women, but the entire population of Gilead. I think it's about time to discuss Offred, the protagonist of the novel. Offred is a character who represents the struggle against oppression, or similarly, the way people generally do not struggle against their oppressors. She does not rebel against Gilead, although she certainly does not agree with their motives or actions enforced by the government. She stands as a passive, almost content in regards to a situation. She regards her life and survival above any other desire. This includes her desire to join and assist the rebellion, or make any big and meaningful actions against her household. These are things we see within the novel as we know Offred wants to, but her fear stops her. The representation of Offred is done on purpose by Atwood, as she's wanted to describe the full impact of oppression and the totalitarian system. The misery is what defines the novel, not as pure fiction but as speculative. The novel holds truth to it. While we see characters such as Serena Joy and Aunt Lydia who are content, even happy with their position, as those with well-standing positions who are not at the bottom of the social hierarchy, we see the way Atwood conveys a society that holds truth. The novel is not about fighting a fascist government or tyrannical rule. It shows the audience a clear picture of oppression against women and against a country. While Offred provides a viewpoint of individuals who value personal survival which breeds content, we are provided insight into characters such as Ofglen and Moira who openly defy the society of Gilead. She escapes the Red Center after she takes apart a toilet, using one of its parts as a weapon, and bluffing her way out by pretending to be an aunt. The representation of both these women who actively fought for their rights only makes their endings all the more disappointing. While Ofglen kills herself to escape capture by the Eyes, and Moira is captured and made to serve as a prostitute to those in power within Gilead. Her fate is consequently unresolved, but Moira too seems to become content within her situation. These representations are written into the novel because Atwood wanted to accurately describe the workings of an oppressive society. In Atwood's novel, the good do not win and those with power continue to have power. While Moira may have made a daring escape and Ofglen may have fought for what she thought was right, their actions seem meaningless as they have no happy ending. They receive no reward. This challenging representation of dystopian writing only adds to the core ideas of the novel, oppression and the way oppression truly plays out in the world. The film V for Vendetta represents a fascist government, similarly to the oppressive actions of the government within The Handmaid's Tale. V for Vendetta takes a more active approach in fighting against one's oppressors. V for Vendetta has a more comical feel to it. It eludes a certain silliness as it focuses on the protagonist V and Evey as they struggle against the tyrannical rule of the government within London over its people. Within V for Vendetta we see Evey and how the film represents women, which is very different in comparison to The Handmaid's Tale. Within the scene's opening shots where the audience is introduced to V and Evey, we are shown how women are represented in direct contrast to men. A woman applying makeup and fixing her hair, and a man strapping on knives. This scene conveys the emphasized femininity that is common within many films. The next scene portrays Evey almost getting sexually assaulted by fingermen. Her savior, the masked, knife-strapped man named V. The representation of emotionally and physically weak females is typical to this genre and to films in general. Not to mention, Evey is one of the only females within the film to have a large amount of speaking lines. Although V for Vendetta does not portray women as accurately as The Handmaid's Tale, it does a good job at representing the way women have little to no power within oppressive dystopian fictions. When we are first introduced to Evey, we see that she's a very typical run-of-the-mill female character. She doesn't gravitate towards violence, yet needs saving twice as she is subsequently knocked unconscious or put into a situation in which she cannot fight back. She can only plead for the fingermen to stop. Let her go. She is saved both times by her handsome Prince Charming V. This portrayal solidifies the way women are presented within fiction and plenty of other mediums. Evey is reserved, afraid, and pessimistic. Although she has as much reason to hate the government as V, they killed her brother and most likely murdered her parents. Her life left shattered by the consequences of oppression. Yet Evey ends up fine. She works an honest job and lives an adequately comfortable life. She's content. The second half of V for Vendetta gives us another version of Evey, a stronger and more willful Evey. She won't shy away from the fight. She helps blow up Parliament and frees London from the High Chancellor Sutler. This depiction of Evey directly contrasts her earlier betrayal. She seems to lose her femininity with a shaved head and loss of empathy. She takes a more masculine approach. I don't want to say I hated Evey, this new one or the old one. I actually like the scene where she chooses V over herself, when she said she'd rather die behind the chemical shed than give up information on V, when she is no longer afraid. But I must say, Evey Hammond does not represent women. Women are not cookie cut. We aren't all weak, conservative, content people. Unlike in The Handmaid's Tale, we aren't given various depictions of women and how they fit into an oppressive society. I think this is a flaw within the story. I would have liked to see how more women, whether they're content, happy or rebellious, I would have liked to see how women fit into the systems of power within V for Vendetta. As far as I could see, the main people in power were all men. I want to end V for Vendetta on a good note. I think if you want to look at the representation of women in dystopian societies, V for Vendetta displays the imbalance of power, the way women are mistreated and the value they're given. V for Vendetta does a good job at representing women as oppressed. Firstly, I want to say that by portraying women negatively, the audience can understand the underlying message of the author when that message relates to the injustices to women. In The Handmaid's Tale, it was not to take your rights for granted, while within V for Vendetta, the message was about fighting for freedom. Both these texts represent an imbalance of power which naturally sways towards men. It depicts the abuse of women and their rights through the abuse of power. The actions within both the texts were done lawfully by the government in power, and this stands to show the full extent of the extremity of abuse of women. The representation of women in dystopian fiction is often portrayed negatively, where the depiction is small abuses of power like the lack of power within women, or major like rape or enslavement. The act of representing these things act like a news article. Writers wish to inform and caution others against actions that could lead to such situations. I believe the representation of women in storytelling is important in the empowerment of women. Having characters that accurately portray women are essential in creating a successful story.